carry on the go. All right. Well, I guess we'll have a delay before we know if we've lost transmission with the live stream, but just let me know, J-Man, what you do. Okay. All right. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Podcasting Under Linux. As I think you guys probably all know, I'm Chris from the Linux Action Show. And what I'm showing you today is sort of how we do it. It's going to be, totally just off-the-cuff Q&A, because I wasn't sure before I started if I was going to have a projector, so I didn't make slides. But I actually have a few things I'm going to show you, and then I thought, too, that I'll show you give you some of our war stories that I learned the hard way. I think probably the first thing to start with is the fact that the biggest hurdle and challenges aren't the technical ones, because I think we're all pretty technically savvy people. We all kind of get, USB, and we can figure it out. We can Google and stuff like that. So all that kind of came as we went along, and as our evolution brought us, we just sort of started putting things together. But probably one of the biggest things that helped was the combination of something like Google Docs. And because the most important thing about a show is that the content of the show is something that all of the hosts can wrap their brains around. Because one of the things you have is if everybody sits down and you guys don't really know what you're talking about, and you haven't been able to collaborate beforehand. Of course, the first problem is not everybody's passionate about the topics, and that doesn't make for a very good show. Everybody kind of has to have interest. So you want to make sure that you're doing something that everybody's kind of on board with. And the other thing is, of course, then everybody gets to sound like they're in on the conversation. So we've used something like Google Docs in the past. This is sort of an extreme example of like a really meaty doc for our new show, TechSnap. And you can see we even utilize on the column side there, we even utilize the notes section, so we can insert and reply to each other's thoughts on a particular topic without injecting that into the actual show notes. Because the other beauty thing is in podcasting, you want to save time. You don't want to work more than you have to, because a lot of us are just doing it as a hobby. So the nice thing about this is it also then immediately translates into show notes. The important thing about show notes, other than just giving the proof that what you've talked about in your show is important and that you actually have read, and there's other people, sources. But the other thing it does is it's actually SEO for your podcast. Google doesn't index an audio show. So you're not going to reach the top of the Google search results by having an audio or video only up on your webpage. So you need to have something for their bot to index, and it needs to probably be more than about 250 characters. Is another good way to go. We're not always this verbose. Like here's an example. This here is the Linux Action Show notes in Google Docs mode. We have basically a template that we follow. And each section gets filled out, and we fill it out, the night or two beforehand. And then when it's time to publish, I just immediately translate this into the show notes, and we're good to go. All of these links become the reference links that you guys click on. And I use Google Docs because it's in the browser. It's easy for everyone to use. It's cross-platform. If you really want to do everything under Linux, though, another tool that I really like and have used, and I know the Ubuntu software development team uses as well, is Gobi. It's a Linux application that lets you do collaborative text-based. Gobi, I think, is G-O-B-I? I'm not sure. I'll double check for you. But it's pretty nice, and I think it's in the repos of most distributions. Oh, it might be G-O-B-Y. Now that I type it out, no, not sure. I'll find it though. If I find it, I'll put a link up when I post this video, because it's pretty handy. So there's that. All right, so that's sort of the preliminary stuff that I just wanted to kind of mention. That's not quite Linux, not quite tech, but it's just sort of the organizational tricks that I've used that using technology can help you get through on your podcast. Really, this kind of stuff has allowed us essentially to walk into the studio and just sit down and record in a lot of cases. Really, like when Brian and I do the Linux Action Show, we started at 10 a.m. Sunday live every morning. And, he usually gets there, 9:30, 9:45? 9:55 sometimes. Yeah. At least it's not his jacket. And then we go live at 10 a.m. And the only way you could do that is if you can collaborate ahead of time. And then, of course, like I said, it's good for your SEO bait on your website. All right. So there's that. Now, the other thing I want to go to is the other big problem I ran into is microphones, especially under Linux. This is a problem under every operating system, but it's gonna depend on how you record. If it's just you and you're calling like somebody over Skype, it's a lot different scenario than when you see just in this room right now. To have the setup that we have, we've got 2 microphones and 2 cameras. You can't just go USB only. But if you're just having a couple of people, USB is actually a really good solution because it's not through your sound card. And that's probably, I don't know, 80% of our audio problems we had early on was going through our sound cards. PC sound cards are just awful. Laptops, desktops, whatever. So bring it in through USB. Some microphones like this is the Rode Podcaster microphone. There's also microphones out there like the Blue Snowball. Those are great. But even if you could just bring in any traditional mic, a mic with XLR jacks if you want, get something like the the M Audio Fast Track Pro. And you bring that into Linux, and Linux has built-in support for that. Then you have nice, clean audio. Really, though, the Rode Podcaster is much better than almost all of them out there. All of like the Blue Snowball, I think even the Blue Yeti, I don't think stack up to this. I think this is just about on par with a $400 microphone, and it's like, I don't know, $180. It also has a local monitor that's nice, so you can listen to yourself. But what I really like, and of course, we'll see how well this works, is you can just bring it. What I've done is it depends on pulse. If you have pulse on your system, it can make things a little trickier. But you want to go in, and I'll just give you an example. If we're going to do like a test recording, I have my recording device is just set to pulse. It's not set to, even though it's in here in the list, there could be Rode. This will happen with other USB mics. Sometimes you'll see in there that they list all the mics on your system, and then they'll just list pulse. On the newer distros, choose pulse. And make sure you have it set to stereo, because it'll also default to mono in Audacity. Then what you do is you go to your sound preferences, and you set your default sound capture to be whatever device you want to record into Audacity with. The reason I don't go directly into the mic is I actually think the sound quality is a little better, and you can get stereo out of it. If you go directly without going through pulse, sometimes you don't get stereo for whatever reason. All right. So now I can just talk right into my Rode Podcaster mic, and I could essentially be recording the Linux Action Show or whatever right now. And if this is your basic setup, this works really easily. This is not very hard, and you can record, and you've got a show. Where it gets more challenging is if you want to do things like Skype calls or bring in other hosts and things like that. Then you want to go from something like a USB mic to like a USB M audio and bring that in. I don't know if I really recommend. Boy, my camera's all out of focus. It's all out of whack. That is really a trip. I don't know if I recommend actually using Audacity to record, to be honest with you. I didn't bring it with me, but we've actually in the past used a hardware device. Because when you get like into 45-minute range, it just seems to be there's something about 45 minutes to an hour that your recording software on a machine starts to have problems. I don't know if it's the length of or the size of the file or what it is. So we would often get into about the 45, 50-minute mark and have Audacity crash on us a lot. So we've gone to a hardware device to record that if we're not doing something like this setup here. So there's lots of things out there. The most important thing to look for is one that records to WAV, or AIF. You don't want to record to an MP3 or an OGG file because then you'll be editing from less quality. But there's that. I'm gonna be a bad host. I'm gonna walk away and see if I can fix the camera. Because I want to show you a nice thing. There we go. So you see that audio waveform there? There's a couple of things to note about this. First of all, that would sound awful to listen to. It's a mess. And there's a lot of really, really great commercial solutions on Windows and Mac OS X to fix your audio that are really like one-click fix. And then they're really nice. Under Linux, it's a little more work, but I've got a couple of tricks that I think actually have made things a little easier. I will show you first an example in an actual podcast. We just recorded, this is the last show we recorded before we tore down the studio to come up here. And it's our show called TechSnap. So here is, on that bottom row there, that's the TechSnap audio. And what you kind of get a sense of is you can kind of see when I was talking versus when another person was talking. You see those highs, those peaks there? That's when the person over Skype was talking. And so it's louder and it's a little more tinny than my voice is because the Skype doesn't support the full fidelity that this microphone could record and things like that. So what you've got is anywhere there's these peaks that don't match the lows is a subtle uncomfortableness to the human ear, basically. And you're probably more important than almost any other thing is to not aggravate the listener when they're listening. If they have to tune in and there's something about it that's obnoxious, it's a little annoying to the ear, it's difficult to stay tuned in and listen to that. And so you can drop one of the things, you can get your downloads, but the people might not be listening to what you're saying if they find it really hard to listen to. So let me show you sort of like from the Magic Bake oven here. If I magically put an episode in the oven, the end goal of what I'm going to try to show you here is you want something that's going to kind of look like this a little bit. So this bottom row that's coming in right now is the final version of TechSnap, the episode right above it. So above it is before I processed, and below it is after I processed. And the difference there is a much more consistent sound, and the peaks and valleys are sort of evened out a little bit, and a person can set the volume knob to 5 on their stereo and not have to constantly reach for it every time the discussion changes. So that's kind of what you want to work for, and there's a couple of different ways to do that. You can definitely do it by hand in Audacity, and I really think that this is probably the best audio editor for podcasting if you want to do audio podcasting. So you can definitely do it under Audacity. Check out, boy, my menus are just a mess. New Ubuntu global menus, you guys, a mess. Check out the three things you really want to check out is Normalize, and you want to check out Compressor, but you also want to check out this guy here, possibly. This is called the Equation, and it just goes through and sort of equalizes the volume out. And you can also do things like bass boost or AM radio effect, Brian. Keep that in mind, just saying. Bass effect, treble boost, things like that. This will go through and it'll run a process on the audio file and sort of even out some of the audio things. Yeah, go ahead.
You were saying you had difficulty with Audacity recording around the 45-minute mark.
Yeah.
How about editing files that long?
Not as many as recording, but I've definitely had issues where you get into that, where you bring an audio file in Audacity and you do this thing where you wait, and as it builds, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait. What I found that usually where there's crashes there is something with the file, something the way the file was recorded, and I don't know why, because what I would do is if I recorded on another machine, often it would work fine. If I recorded on a hardware device, it would crash Audacity. So it seemed to be back and forth depending on it. These days, I've worked that out of my chain, and I don't have the issue anymore. But yeah, and earlier Audacity was a lot worse too. So there's a few tools. So right now I'm doing the Equation, and you could do Normalize, and you could do Compressor. You do those things, and generally you're going to get a better sounding file. Resist the temptation to do things like what I just did here. Is one of the options I had checked was bass boost, because it makes you sound more awesome. So you're tempted to do it because you sound cool. But the thing is just like all of you guys probably do, you have your stereo set the way you want it to sound. So try to send them a mainline standard audio file, and then everybody else applies their own EQ. And it goes back to that. People want to hear it and be comfortable when they listen. Like one of the things that I had to try to sort of observe and learn, just to be completely honest, is I would watch Leo Laporte do his shows, and I thought, why are there 2,000 people listening to this guy do the tech show right now? He just sits there and he just talks, one man. And that is super boring, but yet I could just sit there and just kind of like zone out like my 2-year-old does when he's watching cartoons. And I thought, what is it that he's doing? And what it is this even keel, constant audio tone that's very easy to listen to. It's very, very consistent. And I think that's the key that now I'm trying to bring some more of our productions back to, is every episode will be very consistent. And it takes a lot of work, and it starts with when you record, because if you don't record it correctly, and actually you can see here, you can see TechSnap, the second, here I'll show it with the people in the video too. I could have done better. I didn't do so good. It should have been more consistent. Sometimes we'll walk out of the studio and it almost look like the bottom one. It just kind of depends on how much time we have to set up ahead of times and things like that. So of course, garbage in, garbage out, so that means you got to do good. But with some of these tools, you can get closer to this. Now, to be honest with you guys, I did not spend an hour making that waveform look like that. I used to use this awesome tool from the Conversations Network called Levelator. I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard about it, but Levelator would go through and it would do normalize and it would compress and it would do all of that stuff and do it all for you. And then it also had, they put some other magic in there so that way it could analyze the peaks and valleys and figure out the median sound of all of it and then bring everything to that sound level. Well, unfortunately, unless you're a Python guru, you can't get it to work. I think it was written for like Python 2.5 and like, you know, Unity and things like that. Or Unity, jeez. Ubuntu 11.04 uses Python 2.7. I think Fedora does too. So all the new distros, it doesn't work out of the box. Ironically, what does work out of the box, though, is if you have Wine installed and you go download the Windows version, is you can actually download and run the Windows version of Levelator under Wine, and it actually works just fine. Well, I shouldn't say just fine, because I've only started using it for the last week or so. So I've only used it for a little while. Traditionally, I'd used it under an older Ubuntu Studio install where it was no problem. The Levelator, though, does just exactly what the name says. I love naming things to do exactly what they say. So I'll go take that. I'm going to go take an episode of the Linux Action Show. So let's go see if we see how bad that guy is here. Audacity. So we'll take this, and you just drop it on the, or not like that. Well, I'll put it in here too. So here's the, so we'll have a before and an after. So here's a good example. Oh, well, this is kind of a bogus example, but here's a good example of one we did in the studio where we just set a little bit of time and we almost walked out of the studio with a perfect file, right? Except for you can see right there, there's like in the middle of the file, there's like an audio peak. And I would bet that's like the bump or something, you know, some part where we get rocking in the. I wonder if I can. Yeah, or somebody said something super funny. I don't think I have my audio hooked up, but no, I don't. So that's okay. So that's not going to be quite as dramatic as TechSnap was, but I think it's still going to be an interesting look. So now I can drag it and drop it onto the. It lies. Well, you should be able to drag and drop it. I think maybe it locked up on me when I opened up Audacity. Yeah, it did. Oh, so one of the things I've noticed with the Wine version of Levelator, don't click and drag it. Otherwise, it does what it's doing right now. And it totally, yeah, it goes away. So you bring... So the Wine version isn't perfect. So don't touch it, and it works fine. As long as you don't need to use it, it'll be fine. And then... No, shit. Yeah, it's not working now. But you saw the TechSnap file. That's essentially what it does. So if you can get Levelator to work, or if you're really serious about it, another thing you could do is what I do is I just have an old Dell box that ships with like an old version of Ubuntu, and I put Studio on there, and I run. That's my audio editing workstation. It's essentially an audio editing workstation that has the Linux version of Levelator that still works fantastic if you have old Python. You might be able to get old Python working on a newer install too. I just don't really feel like going down that route. And then bring it into there and do that. Once you run it through Levelator, then drop it in Audacity. And then once you're in Audacity, you can do things like export to MP3, OGG, tweak your audio settings, and things like that. All that said, you guys, this is all audio stuff. I've got some experience with video editing under Linux. For the most part, I don't really recommend it. I don't really come out and suggest that video editing under Linux is quite there yet. But it's close, and depending on what you want to do, like if you want to do screencast type stuff, like if you have instructional stuff you want to do, and I think that's a great use for podcasts, especially for open source projects, is do screencasts and walkthroughs. There's editors on here now like OpenShot, and I went through the Ubuntu Software Center just to see what was available. I think OpenShot's probably the best one they have in there, but you can also get some screen capture software now. You can screen capture right to OGG, so you could just post it directly if you wanted to, or you could bring it into your OpenShot editor. Here's an example of, I was getting some shots of Unity for the Linux Action Show review. And if I was just doing a screencast, I could record this and you can just drop it right and open shot, and I could start working on it, and it would be perfect for this. So when I say I don't recommend Linux for video podcasting, it really kind of depends on the type of video podcast that you're doing. If you're doing a screen capture where you want to explain how awesome your new project is and why people should install it right away, that works awesome for that. And there's no reason you couldn't take this, drop the audio out, and run it through Levelator and run it in Audacity and add your stuff there and then combine them back together again. I do that all the time. A lot of the time, actually, when I'm editing video, I bring the audio out separately and run it through Levelator or something like that, just to try to keep that sounding good, because a lot of people just listen and then flip over from time to time when they want to see it. So that's kind of it. Is there any questions? Anybody? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah, other tools inside Audacity I'd recommend, like Compressor or Normalize. If you want, there are some big name, like Brian, what's that one of the guy that he runs like almost entirely off donations? Ardour. Yeah, that's pretty hardcore. The nice thing about Ardour is if you want to do one Linux machine and have multiple USB mics coming off of it, I think Ardour will let you do that. And the nice thing about that is then it'll bring each USB mic into its own audio channel. Yeah. And so you'd have a Chris channel and you'd have a Brian channel in Ardour. And if Brian got all out of hand, I could just go back and post and mute him. It's no problem. And see, the way we record, when you look at our waveforms, is everything gets mixed down into a stereo mix into the final recording. But if you use something like Ardour, use a couple of like these Rode Podcasters or something like that, you probably get your sound quality pretty good because you could apply different effects to each person's recording.
What hardware devices have you used for recording? Have you found that work?
Hardware-based recording has pretty much always been either an Arcos or, God, I've done everything. I've recorded on an Android device. I've recorded on an iPhone, whatever's been there. But we had, for the longest, probably hardware-based recording was an Arcos. It was cool because it was a Linux device recording the Linux Action Show. Yeah. Yeah. You hate those guys, huh? Well, yeah, that's what this was. Yeah. The battery died on this one, but if you plugged it in, it worked. Yeah, it was all right.
So why do you use video cameras?
Well, just because it's budget so far. I mean, I think next time we would go through, we'd probably go DSLRs. The only thing about video, so the question was, why do we use HDV cameras instead of DSLR, like the Canon maybe?
Like A55 or an A33?
Originally, these cameras, we've just had these for a few years now, and they work pretty good. They're good high-definition cameras. This is the HV20 here, and this is the HV30 over on this camera. And this whole setup right here is using FireWire. So one of the things we require is FireWire out. But we also need to be able to run all the time. We need a live feed out.
Is there a way to deal with HDMI?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All the DSLRs are pushing out the radio.
I don't think their HDMI feeds are live in full resolution yet, though.
Well,
I don't know about the. I don't.
depends on the brand.
Yeah, exactly. The Canons I don't think are, but I don't know about the. Yeah. There is a piece of hardware out there called the Blackmagic Intensity Pro. It's like $180. I love it. I love it. And if those DSLRs are pushing out live HDMI video, you slap one of those guys in your machine, and yeah, it'll get it. It works really good. But see, again, when you start going in that direction, there's not a lot of great tools under Linux to manage that. That's kind of a weak spot, I think. That's why just for this, we custom built a Hackintosh to do this. Any other questions? Go, Jamie, man.
You brought up Goby earlier.
Yeah.
Our chat room was kind enough to tell us spelling is G-O-B-B-Y.
G-O-B-B-Y for the spelling of Goby, what I mentioned earlier. G-O-B-B-Y. And that is that you got to have a little server, but I think you can get some like hosted servers for free or cheap. And it just needs a little, or you can run one on a web server somewhere you have or something. And it's just a little, I think it's like an XMPP backend kind of a thing. And then it passes messages between the different editors. Everybody's throwing color code. It's a really good system. It's all open source. Any other questions?
Do you have any recommendations for distribution? Like once you're
Great question. So the question is distribution, and if you're working on for me, the whole workflow, if I'm working under Linux, is I use Audacity to make an OGG version and an MP3 version, and then I have in Nautilus, I have FTP folders, little drop folders, and I bring those up to Libsyn. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Libsyn, Libsyn, and they have a lot of different reasonable hosting packages. The nice thing about Libsyn is they charge you based on storage, not based on bandwidth transfer, which means that if we release an episode of the Linux Action Show that does really well on Reddit or Dig or Twitter or whatever it is, we don't get immediately penalized for having a successful show. All these guys like Cashfly and all these other companies that charge you based on bandwidth, as soon as you do well, you get screwed, and you have to write them a huge check. I did Radio Revolver, and I put it up on Amazon on S3 just as an experiment to see how that worked as a podcast hosting platform, and I got a $400 bill at the end of the month. So I was like, oh, well, I guess that sucks that my show did well. So check out Libsyn. They're one. Now, the problem with Libsyn is they're having a hard time financially, so hopefully they'll be able to make it. But they've got a lot of different hosting packages. You pay them through PayPal. It's like one flat rate for what you use. You go in, and then you can just up it when you need more storage. And they think it's based on a monthly. They so far have been really fast. They will also, which is really nice if you're trying to keep it fast. I don't think I could stress enough, keep the production of your podcast as lean and light and effortless as possible, because if it's a hobby of passion and you get going on this thing and you find that it takes you hours and hours and hours of work to do it, you're going to stop doing it. And then your listener is going to be bummed out. The really great thing about Libsyn is they make some of the things like stat tracking and whatnot, they just take care of it for you, which is super handy. So you can kind of see how how the health of your show is doing. The other thing that they do for you is the RSS feed generation. So that way you don't have to worry about submitting it to iTunes. Well, you have to submit to iTunes, but you don't have to worry about the XML of your RSS feed, if it's iTunes compatible, if it's blah, 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 and all that stuff. So they do that for you as well. We don't particularly use those functions of it because we custom. Every time we do an RSS post, it's a custom thing that we do. But really, for efficiency, you could set this thing up so you literally drop your file in an FTP folder. It reads the ID3 tag of the OGG file or the MP3 file, puts it up on the website, and automatically publishes and updates the RSS feed. I mean, you can literally, if you use Libsyn right, you can literally make your podcast publishing drag, drop, done. That, of course, doesn't take care of any of the Twitter and Facebook-type social marketing, but it does take care of that end. I've found that using custom XML, writing the RSS feeds has been the best way for control, because every now and then one of these automated services at some point or the other has screwed up, and for some reason I've gotten a flood of emails that said, I just re-downloaded all of the videos in your RSS feed. Oh, sorry about that. Our RSS provider messed up and they just had you re-download all of them. Yeah, so since things like that, I've done custom roles, but I think that stuff might have been more like problems of the past too. I think these systems are a little more advanced, a little more mature now. I don't think they're as likely to do that. So it's something to check out. So Libsyn's a great way to distribute, because that can put you in iTunes, that can put you on a regular RSS feed. The other thing that these guys will do, Libsyn, is if you work with them, they'll do a rev share app for Android or the iPhone. And so if you want to get your show and you don't have the resources to develop it yourself, or you don't know if there's a market for it, and you just want to try something, this is a pretty low risk. In fact, I think if you rub the right backs, you can get it in for free even, and then they'll just give you a rev share. Or it's like $25 now. And you talk to these guys, and they use all the existing content that you have up there. You supply them with the art files. And then they have a meh app. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the Linux Action Show's iPhone app. It's okay. But it's there, and people love it. People love it, and one of the nice things is, at least for the iPhone users, you can say you can bypass Apple's restrictions on the go. So that's nice. And then on the Android version, of course, it's fully functional and there's no restrictions anyways. But so that's one complete package, Libsyn, libsyn.com, and they'll give you apps, iTunes, RSS feeds, all that kind of stuff. And even if you want, I think they can even figure out advertising with you.
Can they deal with speeds for Flash or any other?
I don't think so. I think they'll host any file. I think you can put anything up there. I'm not positive about that, but as far as what like their automated system will recognize, I think it's only MP3 or OGG. That's it. Yeah. Any other questions?
Got a few from our chat room.
All right, lay it on me, chat room.
Congolo wants to know if you suspect there will ever be a real viable streaming solution like Wirecast.
So the question is, will there ever be a viable streaming solution under Linux? That kind of depends on your goal. I don't know about video. I guess that kind of depends on Flash and the Flash Media Encoder. But it kind of depends also if you're okay with just doing audio, or if you wanted to do maybe OGG video. Maybe you want to cater specifically to the Linux crowd. The Fluendo guys. The guys that make that media pack and the guys that make that media center system, they also make a streaming server that I've been meaning to check into, an open source streaming server. I think there's some sort of pay model there too. But now you guys might also be familiar with these guys because they've done a ton of work with GStreamer in the past. So they're actually really well known in the whole audio video codec and in the back end stuff. So these guys are working on an open source server that will let you live stream an OGG Theora stream. I don't know what the end client needs to look like to be able to receive that, but I'm looking into that.
Floss just did a show on it, but it actually will output video.
On this guy?
Well, no, it's a different program.
Oh, okay.
It's actually designed for SIP originally.
Oh, yeah.
Push out to normal video client.
That could be something else looking to. Yeah, somebody in the audience was just saying that Floss Weekly just did it's like one part Skype competitor, one part maybe possibly live streaming thing. So I don't know what that was called, but yeah, they just had a video on that. I caught part of that. I'm trying to remember the Fluendo one because I know it's a pretty neat little deal, and it looks like it's pretty low impact to install too. Well, I'll dig around for that. Any other questions from the chat room there, Jamie, man?
Yeah, Recap wants
Flu Motion, that's what it was called, I think.
Delta wants to know if you're wearing pants behind that photo.
Mr. Delta, I am wearing pants, but only for this presentation. As soon as I'm done.
Requested over our chat room at this moment.
Okay, well, that's fair. I think it's called, I think this is it here. It's called Flu Motion, and flumotion.net's where you can find it. And this looks kind of like, because one of the things I always really bugs me is that when we live stream the Linux Action Show, we have to stream it in Flash. We do have an audio-only stream, but it's MP3. So there's no win, really, unless we could get an OGG stream going. And so it's something I've always been following because I've always felt like such a hypocrite when we do the show. But it's just what the technology allows us to do. So that's something to look into. It looks, yeah. Yeah, it does HTTP OGG video streaming. So I'm not sure if that means it would work in like Firefox or what, but there's something there. All right. Well, any other questions before I wrap up?
As far as not a recording question, but starting out,
Starting out, yeah.
you guys get your name out as far as
Oh boy.
how do you go about
Yeah, oh boy. That's Brian. You want any first? My first take is like interviews, and we got on other podcasts to tell other people that were listening to our types of shows. And that's what was great about the Linux community is they were totally cool. They're like, yeah, come on, talk on our show.
Really, we lucked out.
We lucked out.
We started the show at the exact right time.
Yeah.
It was a desperate need for another good quality Linux show.
Yeah, it does. Timing had a bit of it, and then word of mouth by getting another podcast. Getting one of the things that helped was getting the right interviews. So then those places would link to us. That helped a bit, and that getting the interviews was just a process of cold emailing or cold calling, saying, "Hey, we're fans. We'd love to talk to you. We want to come on." And then eventually, a few people came on, and then it just kind of went from there. I don't know. Any other thoughts on how to get started? It's hard. It's really hard. So the question is have we bought AdSense? And I've experimented with it on and off. I still do experiment with it from time to time. AdSense is a really, really, really expensive way to do it, in my opinion, because you really pay for every single click. Whereas one thing that might be more valuable is Facebook ads, because you can get a little more specific on their interests, and you can hit them while they're already viewing something that's already in the vein of your content. So Facebook ads, as creepy as that might sound, it might be one way to go. Honestly, if I wasn't doing these shows at all, I'd probably never be much on Twitter or Facebook other than just for casual stuff. Twitter and Facebook have been an awesome way to reach people, because it's not just to let people know, hey, there's a new show out, but it's also people can be like, hey, Chris, did you see this? And then it makes it into a show, and it makes a show better. I mean, it's like this awesome give and take. So it's worth investing in a social media following. That's easier said than done, but you just got to kind of be obnoxious about plugging twitter.com/ChrisLAS, things like that. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you do other than the podcast to, basically create community and audience?
So the question is what can and what do we do other than podcasting to create community? And I'm glad you asked that, because I was just thinking about that the other day. The community started from something that a common group of people could be passionate about, and then what we had to do was give them a place to organize. So we gave them a forum, and there's an IRC chat room. And then it became a matter of knowing how to nurture that community so that the community wasn't about Brian or Chris or Jeremy. It was about the community. And so it started with a lot of early seeding, of a lot of attention, a lot of being in there. We set up, first it was linuxactionshow.com/forum. But then that got too big, so then when we moved to Jupiter Broadcasting as a company, we got jupiterbroadcasting.com/forum. But then our forum became too big, so we broke it off, and it's jupitercolony.com now. And each phase it's gone through, I've become more and more removed from it. I guess so. So I think what I did is create a structure in which the community can sort of self-maintain. One thing that helped a lot to sort of seed that initial thing was a live stream. The video live stream gives people a common place. It's like the water cooler. You all go to this spot, and you know that there's, I think our numbers right now are, I don't know, maybe the chat room can give us a shout out, but there's a couple hundred other people watching at the same time. And that's just sort of, about 200. So they know there's 200 people just like them that are interested in the same thing watching. That almost just lays some of the basic fundamentals for community building right there. So you give them something to build around.
So I was thinking more along the lines of what tools do you use besides the...
Like software?
No. Like you've already said Twitter and Facebook. You have a presence on Twitter and Facebook. You have a blog, you have a newsletter, you have a mailing list.
Gotcha. We have, we kind of have a blog. We have a blog, so the question was, what other tools do we use to sort of communicate with the community? Do we blog? Do we Twitter? Do we Facebook? Obviously, we do that. But we have the call, so we have the forum. We have a pretty active forum that is has conversations regarding to just general tech and to all of our shows. Then we also have the Facebook page here that we are. I should be a good boy actually and say. So we'll go right before we do a show. We'll say we're live with Linux Fest. I am doing a podcasting session right now. See? So there you go. And then you can give them the URL. So Facebook has definitely been a thing that has turned out to be a bigger community builder than I thought. But considering a mailing list, the main thing is I don't want to be spammy. I want to respect people's inbox, because mine's a disaster, so I assume there's probably other people's out there. So Yeah, it's a bit old school. It depends. Some people like it, but the combination of RSS feeds, the forum, the Facebook, the Twitter account. We do have a Tumblr blog that we kind of use a little bit, but what it is we're just really active with content. I mean, every single day practically we put out content. People see our faces. Our YouTube channel over at youtube.com/Jupiter Broadcasting, it pretty much has a new video on there every single day. So people don't get the sense that we're not around. And then when there's not a video being posted on the channel, we're live. I mean, we're maniacs. We're constantly live. And so I guess the answer is it depends on how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go. If you want to do a show once a week where it's not a revenue generator so much and it's primarily just to help, say, a community build around an open source project, it's more of, say, if your podcasting is more of an enabler for something else other than the end goal itself, I wouldn't worry about it too much, because the community can sense that, and there's not going to be a huge build up around that. If it's something that you want to take on full time, then you end up becoming a community manager as well, and it's just part of this job. And so we answer that question by being highly involved. I mean, everyone here is, like, both these guys are in the chat room right now talking with people and all that kind of stuff. So we're just actively involved along with content. I think that's the way to go, and I think that's kind of the expectation now. I think blogs are good for, like, big news updates, like we just hired this person, or we're moving this show to Wednesdays, that kind of thing. I think that's where blogs are for, or maybe a mailing list. I don't think blogs will bring you engagement. I just don't see it, because it's so passive.
The other question I had was, how do you deal with ads?
In what sense? Like on our website? Or?
Do you put commercials into the podcast?
Okay, so the question is ads, and if you can get ads in your show, that's probably going to be your most profitable way. You can do ads on your website, like AdSense. You can do video pre-roll ads, which we do. We do those. And they will generate a very mediocre income. But if you can sell ads in your show, you set that price. And you can set that price to whatever you think somebody will pay. And that will be the highest revenue generating. So yeah, we do. The Linux Action Show is always sponsored by GoDaddy. And then on occasion, FreshBooks is sponsoring us now. And we're always looking for more sponsors. Same with all our other shows. On occasion, we'll have occasional sponsors, depending on what we can sell. We sell spots and show like a person sells inventory from their store. We have slots. These slots go for a certain rate. If you buy at a certain bulk price, you get more for less. If you buy 1, 2, you pay more. So that's how we manage it, because that's what works for us. It really depends. I know other podcasters have always just done a flat rate. One of the things we're going to try today for the first time, it's sort of like a community bridge and advertising, is we're going to do a sponsored community segment. We're going to offer $50 community sponsor segments where people can pay $50 over PayPal and they'll sponsor the news segment or something like that. That way the community, because the whole idea is there could be people like in this audience that have a podcast or have a product that they can't afford hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars to get in a show, but they could afford $50 to get a quick name and a mention. And it seems to me to be a great way to let the community sponsor a show, support the show, and also get their own message out there. So that's one route we're going to take with monetizing a show. I would say, if you're going to run ads in your show, try to think of that early enough so that you can work it in, so that way you're comfortable doing it when you get your sponsor. One thing I've always thought about, I've never taken Audible.com on as a sponsor for the Linux Action Show, because Audible doesn't play on Linux. You can't use just DRM's crap. But I love Audible. I have a Galaxy Tab, and you should look at my Audible app on that thing. I marathon on Audible like an SOB. I would love to have Audible as a sponsor. So I've thought about, on my other shows where we don't have an active sponsor, I could do the affiliate thing. So I could say, hey, you know what? If you're a fan of this book, we've got a link in the show notes. Go check this out. It's like a mini ad where nobody's committed to anything, that I can work into the format of the show so that if somebody later on down the road does want to buy an ad, I've already kind of got a spot in the show. I'm already kind of comfortable talking about that kind of thing. The audience isn't like, all of a sudden hit with an ad that's out of nowhere after a year of having a show. So that's one thing to consider is look at affiliates.
What's the name of that site? Affiliate Junction or something like that?
Commission Junction, I think. Yeah, like CJ.com or something like that.
Yeah, that's a really good one to get.
Or Amazon's got an affiliate program, and yeah. But Commission Junction now, the payout's not very great. You have to get, like I think some of them are like say Carbonite.com. You can get if you're an affiliate for Carbonite, you get $25 every time somebody signs up for an account when they use your affiliate code. That's a tank of, well, it's not even half a tank of gas. That's a trip to McDonald's. No, I don't know. But it's $25, but it's more about getting the audience used to having that in the show, so that way you don't feel like all of a sudden you're people will react strongly when you change format sometimes. It's one thing I think one last little tip I'll give is we think of doing these shows as we're doing them for free, and early on I kind of had this mentality like, well, I don't care if it doesn't sound perfect because they're getting it for free, so they can deal. And what I realized later on is that, as I started listening to more podcasts, is that people are paying in their time and their attention, and a lot of people consider that really valuable. So that goes back to making it sound good too, because I think sometimes for some people, when they're listening to a podcast, there's a little timer in the back of their head that says, "Am I getting value out of this?" Not everybody, but some people go, "I could get more out of the radio. I could get more out of another show." So you got to have a reason to have them keep that dial on, and good audio quality, and keeping it interesting, having to be prepared with the docs, get all your show notes ready so that way there's not these weird, super uncomfortable pauses and things like that. So have all that stuff prepared. Yeah. All right. Is that it? I feel like I've talked a lot. So.
There's a couple more questions from our chat room about specific.
More questions.
I think there's software.
All right. Lay it on me. I'll see if I can answer them.
Rika wants to know if you've ever used Joe Kosher, I think.
Jokosher. Is Rikai making a little joke in the chat room? I hope Jono's watching. I don't know, Jono. Can I use Jokosher? So Jokosher was going to be a GarageBand-like competitor. It sounded really awesome. It looks great. It never went anywhere. And we had really high hopes, and we talked a lot about it on the Linux Action Show years ago. And Rikai was probably around back then when we did that. But Jokosher, I don't know what state it's in. If it's gotten any further, it was kind of like GarageBand for Linux. No? Yeah, that's too bad.
Danoff wants to know if you've ever used Subversion.
Subversion for what?
For podcasting. Versus Control?
I guess maybe if I messed up an audio file, I could go back. But no, I've never used Subversion. I do use Dropbox heavily, and that does a certain level of version control. Dropbox has been awesome for remote editing. Like these guys, if they want to do something from home, they got files in there, images. I mean, we put everything in there. All of our artwork, everything. So that way, where anybody can do something. If something strikes them for the fancy, they have everything they need to do something. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll give that some thought. So the question was a quick rundown of some of the tools. Help me out, guys, if I forget anything. But yeah, let's start with Dropbox and Google Docs, and then Google Images.
And the recording software, so Audacity.
Yeah, Audacity for audio. If we're doing video, it's Wirecast. If it's video for editing, we'll use Final Cut. If it's audio, we'll use Audacity and Levelator. FTP software to get it up, and that's really, if you use something like Libsyn, I mean, we're talking, it's pretty minimal. It's not a lot of work. Really, on a full audio podcast, if we only did audio, everything I need would be on this laptop. I could go back to the hotel room and record a whole show. It would be awesome. One tag. Oh yeah, WordPress for publishing. Yeah, that's a great one. WordPress for publishing. I hope people didn't tune out before I got to this one, because I want to give this tool a mention. Over the years, there's some tools that have just been awesome, unlike Levelator, which has given me issues. But Easy Tag has got to be the best tag editor I've ever used. And it would be like kind of a weird thing. You can almost see him. I'm almost sexually aroused by how much I love this tag editor. But I'll be honest with you, I've had tag editors, OGG files get munched sometimes by a bad tag editor. And if you get a munched OGG ID3 tag, then the person's player crashes. And then you're the dude that crashed their player. And then for whatever reason, when their player crashed, they lose all of their settings. You're the dude that made their player crash that caused them to lose all their settings, and then they hate you. And I've gotten a lot of those emails. And what I found out was, A, never, ever, ever put a picture in an ID3 tag for an OGG player, for an OGG file. Okay, lesson learned. Second thing I learned is use easy tag, because easy tag just works. It never messes up my tag files for OGG files. And it's free. It's available for Linux, definitely, but I think it's available for Windows if you install GTK. And you go in there. The other thing it supports is copying the fields. So, like, I have an MP3 version and an OGG version. I write the tag out once, copy all the fields, paste it on the next file, hit save, I'm done. I don't have to write it out twice. So I really like easy tag, and that's definitely one last thing I do. I put an album art in there. I put all this stuff in there, so that way when people play it back, it says the show name, it says the season, all that stuff. So that's probably the last big tool that I've used for years that I wouldn't do this without. Does that sound, yeah?
You guys have done a couple of interviews in the last couple episodes. How do you make that happen?
How do we make the interviews happen is the question. Okay. See that board there? Generally through that. So what we'll do is we have a much bigger version of that in the studio, and we have a dedicated Skype computer. Well, dedicated as in it's dedicated for that task when we're using Skype. And it goes in with an audio out channel into the mixer just like everything else. So it gets mixed in and then sent into the audio stream. So we have tried like using Jack and stuff like that to try to capture the Skype sound in software. And I know a lot of people have success with that. I have learned, basically when Audacity was crashing on me a lot back in the day, I've learned to just try to avoid using software solutions. So we've gone to the mixer. The nice thing about that is, it's right there. You can slide them up, slide them down. You can tweak. Sometimes people come in over Skype and they have a lot of computer noise, and if you turn down their high levels, it helps a little bit. And so always gone the mixer route myself.
So how does your USB microphone?
That wouldn't be for this scenario. This, like I said in the beginning, this is really for more of a one-person scenario, a USB mic, or a two-person was using something like a door. If you want to go into a board, then what we do is we run out from the board into an M Audio, a Fast Track Pro. So we still bring it into the computer using USB, and so it still sounds good, but it's just a little bit different, mechanism. Yeah, 4 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Doer kind of does, yes. It does. So the question was, is there a way to emulate a mixer in software? Yeah, Jack and Ardour will let you patch stuff in and change levels and stuff like that. Yep, it's really cool. It's really cool. It's a beast to set up, but it's really cool. And I've always found it just to be way overkill, really, but yeah. All right, well, I think that's great. Any other last questions before I wrap? No? All right, thanks, guys. Hope you guys picked anything up, and just feel free to ask me any questions if you have them. And if you're watching this on the reruns, twitter.com/ChrisLAS, or join me in the chat room, and I'd be happy to answer a question. Thanks for watching. Thank you. All right, guys. I'm all done. Now do I get to eat breakfast?